Pokemon hat, and a run unlike any I have ever seen over the past, I would say, 8 months of Magic. A handful of Grand Prix top 8s and Invitational top 8. He is currently leading the Rookie of the Year race. It's basically his to lose, much like CVM in the Season 2 race, but I actually think it's harder for Jared to lose.
Yeah, he's got a pretty substantial lead. And like you mentioned, as you've said, he's been on quite the run, both in the Open Series, Invitationals, Grand Prix, Pro Tours. It's been a really impressive stretch here by Jared.
I truthfully do not believe I've ever seen anything like it. I mean, he went from, top 8ing a Grand Prix, top 8ing an Open, whatever, winning a PTQ, getting 9th at his first Pro Tour because he wasn't able to win it in, so he just, he won his last match knowing he was going to get 9th. His second Pro Tour, he can't win it in, so he ends up drawing and gets like 12th. Top 8's Grand Prix Cincinnati in the meantime there, wins a Sunday Super Series. Like, he is doing an amount of winning that is borderline unreasonable.
Yeah, and has catapulted himself into the top 25 of the Magic the Gathering players standings.
Yes. So his play has been exceptional over the past 8 months. We're going to see him here playing Jund midrange. He's playing against Bryant Cook, who's playing Esper Control. Bryant, much more known for his legacy prowess. He's an incredibly good Storm player. We'll see if he can hold it together in Standard today. He's playing Esper, as I mentioned. He's going to play a Temple of Silence. You see a Temple of Enlightenment and a Hallowed Fountain in play for him. He's going to leave his top card on top. Boettcher did play a Temple of Malady into a Mutavault plus a Scavenging Ooze. His third turn is going to be a Swamp. This seems like it's going to be a Thoughtseize, and it is.
And this Jund mid-range deck has been popularized by Owen Turnwald, among others. It's pretty close to a green-black mid-range deck that is touching red for Rakdos' Return and a couple sideboard cards.
You see the hand for Cook. He's got a Sphinx's Revelation, a Doomblade, a Supreme Verdict, a Thoughtseize, a Syncopate, and a Dissolve. He left his top card on top pretty quick. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a land.
Yeah, the Esper control deck really mana hungry, and of course, this hand especially so needs mana.
So we'll see what Boettcher does want to take. There are a lot of good cards to take there, but as you did mention, this hand does need mana to operate. He does have a Syncopate at the ready, potentially, but Boettcher does now have that information, so he'll be able to play around it. But again, very powerful cards here in Cook's hand. He's going to take the Revelation, will Boettcher. You could argue that's the most powerful card there.
It's certainly the most powerful card, and if Jared can't win the game quickly, which is likely in the face of the Supreme Verdict and multiple counterspells that are in Brian's hand, he's probably going to play a long game, and you can't let your opponent have Sphinx's Revelation in that world.
An untapped land comes off the top there for Cook. Immediately puts a Mutavault into play before passing the turn back, representing all those spells we just saw a moment ago from the Thoughtseize. Boettcher is going to untap and take a draw. You see a Vraska, Connections, and a Courser in his hand. Looks like he may have picked up a green-black land as well. Going to figure out how he wants to navigate this game. He's going to start by attacking with the Ooze.
And Jared's going to be loath to cast really any of his spells while Bryant has 3 mana available, because allowing Bryant to resolve, to scry rather, when he's stalled on mana is really dangerous for Jared.
You should have said resolve and dissolve.
Yeah.
It would have just flowed nicely.
Right. I thought of it and then caught myself and then realized it was a mistake, basically.
A Mana Confluence will be Boettcher's 4th land of the game. Looks like he's going to take one, so we got a double green spell on the way. This might be the Courser that's in his hand, and it is. We'll see if Cook has any interest in resolving a Dissolve here in this situation to scry maybe for another land.
And this is a great play here by Jared. You can see his hand here with a couple powerful spells. If this Courser resolves, Brian's response is most likely to cast Supreme Verdict, and then that gives Jared an opportunity to resolve one of the really powerful spells in his hand.
A Temple of Malice is the top card from the Courser, as Boettcher did already play a Mana Confluence. That land's not going to be coming into play, so Cook knows exactly what Boettcher will be drawing. What Cook doesn't know are the cards in Boettcher's hand as he takes a draw for the turn. It looks like a Temple of Deceit is what he picked up, and he will play that. It's time to scry. Top card is going maybe to the bottom. He's going to consult the grip there again. Look at the Thoughtseize, the Syncopate, the Doomblade, the Verdict, and the Dissolve. He's going to put that top card to the bottom, and we'll see if he does want to fire off this Supreme Verdict now.
I assume because he was unwilling to use a counterspell or even a Doomblade on that Courser, we're going to see Supreme Verdict.
And there is the Verdict for the 2-for-1 action. Going to pass it back to Boettcher. He will draw that Temple of Malice that we all do know about. This gives him the opportunity to resolve a Connections, potentially resolve the Vraska if he does have an untapped land, but he doesn't, so he'll go with Temple of Malice. He'll take a look at the top card.
And Underworld Connections is really important for Jared's Game 1 plan here. It's really hard for him to win against all the card advantage and counter spells that Esper brings to the table, so he needs some form of repeat card advantage to have a shot.
And also certainly pretty nice that he knows his opponent does not have a Detention Sphere in the hand at the moment, so Connections does resolve on the Swamp. You've got Cook. He's going to play another copy of Temple Deceit that he just drew for the turn. Top card does go to the bottom there for the Mets fan as he rolls up his sleeves, looks at the hand, knows he doesn't have an answer to the Connections. Now he just has to figure out, maybe I attack with a Mutavault, maybe I keep representing these counter spells. Maybe I finally fire off this Thoughtseize I've had for some time.
He's been holding it in his hand because his black mana has been taxed. He's been wanting to hold up Doomblade instead.
He will just pass the turn back. Boettcher going to activate the connections, pay 1 for a card. Not a bad deal. Does pick up a land, it looks like. He'll take another draw for his turn. So 2 new cards added to the Rookie of the Year leading's hand. You've got a Temple of Malady. Top card's going to go to the bottom. You see a couple forests there, it looks like Boettcher has in his hand. So the one thing he doesn't have, even though his connections, he doesn't really have like a good piece of action.
And he really needs to get some amount of pressure in play here, because even though he has underworld connections, the pacing of this game gets totally blown up if Bryant's able to find a Sphinx's Revelation. So Jared is in a reasonable spot right now, but he needs to get something going.
Aetherling may cause a little bit of trouble as well. That was Cook's draw. He's just going to pass the turn back. Doesn't have the land for the protection just yet. A little surprised not to see him firing off this Thoughtseize yet either. But again, to me, it just feels like he's leaving up the counter magic and just kind of hoping for the best here. But Thoughtseize does a nice job of blowing that up.
And this feels dissolve worthy to me if I'm in Brian's seat.
Scry certainly can't hurt, right?
Scry is valuable, and he wants to protect this Aetherling in the hand. It's possible Aetherling with 1 mana up is just game over. So it wouldn't surprise me if Brian's trying to get to that spot in the game.
Dissolve will take care of the Thoughtseize. The Scry will happen as well. Let's see if Boettcher has anything else that he wants to do on this turn. This may be another discard spell. Maybe not. Going to play a land. Going to go with a Pack Rat. So, going to try to set up that advantage here. Again, the creatures in Boettcher's deck, 4 copies of Courser of Crewfix, 3 Pack Rat, 2 Scavenging Ooze, and 4 Desecration Demons. So as you mentioned, this is kind of just like a green-black Devotion deck with a little bit of a red splash, but at the same time, it's a little more green-heavy as well.
Right. And this Pack Rat's very sweet for Jared here. He doesn't even really care that much about getting tagged by a Detention Sphere because he has another source of card advantage in his Underworld connections.
Cook going to tap 6 mana, leave a blue open for the Aetherling. As you mentioned, this could just be game over all by itself, and Cook is certainly going to try to make that be the case. This is an ultimate price targeting the Aetherling.
I believe Jared's just making a rat here.
Wow, he's going to try to swarm him.
Yep. I mean, Brian's at 12. Jared does have a Mutavault in play, and the rat can get very big, very fast. Jared can make multiple rats a turn at this stage, so I think he's just going to try to go on the aggressive here.
Fair enough. I assume that we might see, the ultimate price at the end of turn to make Aetherling go away for a turn, maybe get some attacks in that way, but that does not look to be the case. Boettcher is going to try to swarm the Aetherling with a pack of rats.
He does have the tools to race here. Next turn, for example, Brian can't even block with the Aetherling, he can block and remove it because Jared can make 2 rats and activate his Mutavault.
That's true.
So it's a risky gambit here, but Jared's in a pretty good position to try to race.
Certainly playing to win, and again, he knows the cards in Cook's hand for the most part because of the prior Thoughtseize, and Cook has just been playing land go, so he's not really adding any cards to his hand. He still has a Doomblade in his hand, which is relatively useless at this point, He has a Thoughtseize as well, which I don't think he can cast anymore either.
Pretty close to useless as well.
Yeah. So Boettcher, after a couple activations of Underworld Connections, has drawn his cards. He's taking a look at the hand. You see the Vraska that's been there for a while, Temple of Malice, a Forest, and a Mystery card hanging out there. None of those cards really matter all that much, I think, given that it looks like most of them are going to become Pack Rats.
I think that Jared is just switching into a purely aggressive game. If he is able to find efficient ways of fogging the Aetherling for 1 turn, another copy of Ultimate Price, for example, Devour Flesh, we might see those spells getting cast, but I think for the most part, he's just going to be devoting his mana to making rats and activating Mutavault.
You see, he's going to try to figure out exactly what the best plan of action is right now. He's going to start by playing a land. You see the mana kind of organized there. A couple blocks of 3 for Pack Rats at this point. Now, we are definitely in a racing situation as Boettcher's going to come in here with these Pack Rats. So let's not forget about that mana confluence that's over there on Boettcher's side. That may add to the race for him in a negative way. You see, now he reorganizes the mana again.
Well, I believe the last card in Boettcher's hand there, is it another copy of Ultimate Price? Oh, no, it's Desecration. Never mind.
And that's going to the bin.
Yeah.
As is Temple of Malice as well. So going to shortcut a little bit here. He says, I'm going to activate Pack Rat twice. I'm going to use Mana Confluence to activate Mutavault. So Boettcher's going to go down to 11. 2 more rats are going to come into play. And now Aetherling's going to go away.
This is what I spoke of before. Jared's just in a great position to race here because the Aetherling can't even block this 1 turn. Or rather, it can't block and actually kill anything. It can only just block and fog.
Now, Boettcher is obviously taking a very aggressive approach to this game, and I think the thought process here is, if my opponent doesn't draw a Detention Sphere or a Supreme Verdict right away, they just lose.
Also, the other reason he needs to take an aggressive approach is he's dead in 2 turns.
That's also true.
So he's got to try to win in 2 turns himself.
Not sure what Cook picked up on that turn, but as you did mention, he is basically dead in 2 turns if he doesn't hurry. Cook taking a look at his hand. Again, we know about Doomblade, we know about Thoughtseize, we know about Syncopate. It looks like the card that was drawn was a Plains. It doesn't look like there's any help there for the Esper Control player.
And next turn, Jared's going to be able to draw a card with the Underworld Connections at the end of Brian's turn, untap with 3 cards in hand. So again, he'll be able to activate Pack-a-Rat twice and activate Mutavault.
Aetherling is coming in for some damage, going to work its way by the Pack-Rats due to the unblockability. Aetherling's going to blink out now. So Cook trying to show strength here.
Yeah.
Of course, we can see the grip, and we know that he does not have much of an answer. And I think Boettcher will be able to deduce that as well, because as you mentioned, Boettcher is in a situation where, I have to try to kill you anyway. I'm dead in 2 turns.
Yep.
So you see he's tapping 5 mana. This might be for the Vraska, and this will be that we have seen for a while. Boettcher's going to go down to 6 on the Mana Confluence. So he's got the Mutavault in the forest off to the side with the ability to activate that as an attacker now.
Yes. And if Brian wants to use his mana syncopating, which Jared knows that there's a syncopate in his hand from that earlier Thoughtseize, that means there's not enough mana left over for Brian to activate his Mutavault.
Yeah.
So either Vraska comes into play, and that's game over, or the syncopate targets Vraska, and there's not enough mana for Brian to do everything he needs to do.
So Brian is going to blink out the Aetherling. Boettcher's going to look at his Courser of Crew Fix, realize that doesn't have an effect on the game. Heck, he can't even cast the card anyway right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in just a moment here, we're going to see Boettcher turn everybody sideways, including that Mutavault, which will activate off the forest. And it's going to be a Pack-Rat attack. Cook will look at his hand really quickly. But I don't think that he has anything that's going to help him in this situation. Again, Doomblade, Thoughtseize, Syncopate, and it's going to be a concession. So Jared Boettcher is going to win game number 1 here over Brian Cook. Jund mid-range, up a game over Esper Control. We're going to get to the sideboards in just a second. But again, this Jund mid-range deck, you said popularized by Owen Turtenwald.
I believe. I saw him playing it on CVM's stream at least the other day.
Yeah,
so.
It's a different, it's kind of different. It kind of fits in the mold of a Black Devotion strategy, which is just good creatures, good removal spells, a little bit of discard. You can argue the best 2 cards in the format in Thoughtseize and Mutavault.
And this deck is going much more into a green-black shell rather than a Black Devotion shell. Course of Crew Fix, of course, a double green spell, so the mana base is much more evenly spread. This is more of a good stuff value deck in my mind.
Something that Owen is very familiar with.
Yes.
As he played Jund a lot last season. Moving to the sideboards here, you can see Cook is moving very quickly to a couple of cards, so I'll take a look at his sideboard. First, you've got a Pithing Needle, 2 copies of Dark Betrayal, a Thoughtseize, a Dispel, 2 Negates, a Deicide, a Blind Obedience, 2 copies of Nyx's Fleece Ram, along with 2 copies of Sin Collector, a Blood Baron of Vescopa, and an additional copy of Aetherling. You take a look at Cook's main deck, he has an Aetherling and a Blood Baron there, so he could sideboard into 2 of each of those if he'd like. I do actually like the use of an additional Blood Baron in this matchup, even though it isn't lights out as it normally is against, I'd say, Black Devotion strategies. There's some timely chump blockers and things of that nature.
And Brian, I think, needs to add in some more victory conditions. It's just hard to fend off the Jund deck forever, especially in the post-board games when they're going to theoretically bring in more discard and more big haymaker spells like additional copies of Rakdos Return.
You imagine because those spells will likely be coming in from Boettcher's side, these Sin Collectors are certainly going to be useful. Wouldn't be surprised to see 2 of those come in. Dark Betrayal seem relatively easy to bring in as well. You can make an argument for the Thoughtseize, you can make an argument for the 2 copies of Negate, the Deicide to take care of Underworld Connection, same thing with Pithing Needle. So a lot of options here at Cook's disposal. What's Boettcher got?
2 copies of Erebos, God of the Dead, a Rakdos Return, a Scavenging Ooze, 2 copies of Golgari Charm, an Unravel the Aether, a Drown in Sorrow, a Doomblade, a Devour Flesh, a Magma Spray, a Silence the Believers, and 3 copies of Lifebane Zombie. I think you're going to see the 2 copies of Erebos and the Rakdos Return naturally come in, additional sources of card advantage, and big haymaker spells, very good against Esper. The 2 copies of Golgari Charm as well are likely to come in. The Regeneration Clause can give him some play against Supreme Verdict, and there's a lot of Detention Spheres and Banishing Lights and so forth in most Esper lists, so some enchantment removal is good there. Unravel the Aether may come in for similar reasons, although I suspect that's a little too narrow. I'm not sure if he's going to want to go so far as to bring in his 3 copies of Lifebane Zombie. A 3-power Intimidate creature for 3 is okay against Esper for the most part, and there is the chance of some white creatures, whether it's Blood Baron of Viscopa, Obzak, Ghost Council, and so forth. So if he has a lot of cards to cut, and the thing that he's really going to want to cut here, of course, is his removal spells. Just not a lot of targets in Brian's list. So there's an Ultimate Price, a Bioblade, and 2 copies of Devour Flesh that definitely need to get cut. And that makes room for 2 Erebos, God of the Dead, a Rakdos Return, and 2 copies of Golgari Charm if he's able to cut one other random card. So I don't think he has quite enough to warrant bringing in the Lifebane Zombies, but it's not out of the question here to bring in those as well.
Well, we will see how the Rookie of the Year frontrunner will sideboard here. If you guys are just joining us, we appreciate you. Early this morning in Providence, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, the Star City Games Open Series here in Providence, Rhode Island. I was here last year. Apparently, you were not here for the Team Grand Prix.
This is my first time in Providence.
I'm surprised by that, actually,
I am
given
too.
that you grew up in Jersey. How far is Jersey from here?
About a 5-hour drive.
Okay, I would assume that, at some point in your life, you probably played a PTQ or something here.
No, never got that far. I've been to Boston multiple times for events when I was living on the East Coast, but never quite got to Rhode Island.
Well, at SCG Live, hashtag SCGPROV for your tweets all weekend long. Again, round 1 of 10, 466 players here in attendance for our Standard Open. The last one before our Season 2 Invitational in Columbus. I know you and I will be there in just a couple of days, oddly enough. No Blue Jackets game to go watch this go around.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, it is only a couple days.
Yeah, it's not long. Like, we're gonna do the show here. We'll fly home on Monday to our respective cities, and then on Thursday we're back on the road again.
Yeah, I flew back from my little vacation in New Jersey Tuesday morning. Flew out here 72 hours later.
Yep.
And then go home, and then 72 hours later I'll be on a plane to Columbus.
Planes are sweet.
It's not bad.
That's not the worst life to have. Oh. So game 2 will be underway here shortly. Again, a lot of players here in attendance. I know CVM, of course, came along with BBD. Those guys just can't stay at home on a weekend.
Yeah, I was talking to those guys a little bit, and BBD and CVM were musing to themselves why we bothered came into this tournament. And I said, you're never going to know what the points were that mattered until after it's all said and done.
Yep, pretty much.
Last season, if I had gone to a couple more Grand Prix back when I was playing more, I would have been qualified for several more Pro Tours this year. And I only got to know that after the fact, after I'd accumulated some points that season. So
you also don't know how those points are going to affect the next year either.
No, so you never want to leave any points on the table because you never know what were going to be the points you left on the table that ended up costing you thousands of dollars in invites and all that kind of stuff.
Those guys are the definition of grinders.
Oh yeah,
I do like it. Ross Merriam in the house as well. Some other players that are just kind of known up here in this area as being a quite good Magic player. So I know we'll have some fantastic feature matches to watch, up to and including Jared Boettcher from the Albany area as well. So we do see him in action. I'm sure we'll see Bryant a lot tomorrow playing Storm.
Do you know the way to Albany? That's apparently a song. Ben Lundquist, who's from the Albany area, introduced me to it.
Never heard of that before.
Or maybe it's just an expression. I don't know. But in any event.
Underway in game number 2 here, a Temple of Silence going to leave the top card on top, a Temple of Malice here for Boettcher. Looks like he is going to put the top card to the bottom. You see Golgari Charm along with an Underworld Connections in Boettcher's hand. Cook just going to play an untapped island past the turn back, able to represent a card like Syncopate in this scenario. Same thing can be said for Negate. An Overgrown Tomb here for Boettcher, going to come in and play tap before passing the turn back. Cook will just play an island. Now he can represent a dissolve, and it looks like a spell is coming here from Boettcher.
And the game plan here post-board for Jared is just to resolve some very large source of repeat card advantage, like an Underworld Connections or an Erebos, much like Mono Black's Devotion's plan is against Esper, or he's able to resolve a big Rakdos return. Those are the big plans of attack here.
Cook going to Syncopate that Lifebane Zombie, and now a Jace is going to come into play, just going to tick on up. Could be taken care of by Hero's Downfall, another removal spell. We'll see if Cook is able to get some value out of this momentarily, as Boettcher does play a Swamp as his 4th land. He's going to go reaching for some mana, and this is an Underworld Connection. So as you mentioned, it's important for him to get a card advantage engine into play, and he has done just that, as Cook will now tick down the Jace. 3 cards coming in the form of Dissolve, along with the Supreme Verdict and an Island.
And I don't mind Bryant going and plussing with his Jace last turn, even though it looks a little unorthodox. Doesn't want to just lose it to a Mutavault. Also, potentially Rakdos return could take care of the Jace as well.
That's true. Time for Boettcher to split him up. It looks like it's going to be Island and Verdict versus the counter spell.
It's always an interesting debate when you're playing against black decks. Do you Jason plus, knowing that you have the potential to lose it to Hero's Downfall for no value, or do you minus into a face of a Mutavault, getting your cards right away and forcing them to commit mana, but knowing for sure that you're not getting any more value out of your Jace?
Hollow Fountain going to come into play tapped here for Cook before he does pass the turn back over to Boettcher, who will activate Underworld Connections. Go down to 19, picks up a copy of Temple of Malice. Boettcher will take a draw now. Another copy of Underworld Connections is what he's found. Difficult to play 2 of those out against these Esper decks simply because of Detention Sphere.
And you can see why, given the pacing of the game that Jared's going for here, that it's really good for Bryant to sideboard into extra copies of Aetherling. Jared's going to be able to keep pace card advantage-wise. He's going to have a variety of discard spells to attack his hand, but this game plan that Jared's trying to execute right now, very susceptible to a fast Aetherling. It's just a lot of just slow sources of card advantage, so.
In comes Mutavault going after Jace. Jace going to go down to 1. That means Jace does not get to activate the card drawing ability for the next turn. So Boettcher will pass it back over to Cook with the ability to activate Underworld Connections at the end of Cook's turn. But we'll see what Cook wants to do on his 6th turn to the game. He's going to start by ticking Jace up to 2. He'll play an untapped Plains and simply pass the turn back. Boettcher going to go down to 18. He's going to pick up another card here. Looks like it may have been a copy of Lifebane Zombie. Boettcher will untap. He'll take a draw. And it's going to be a Thoughtseize, which can clear the way for whatever he'd like to try to resolve here. It looks like we are going to start with the powerful discard spell.
And Thoughtseize is so good in this spot. Brian's building the game to a place where either Aetherling or a large Sphinx's Revelation is a real threat for Jared. So this Thoughtseize has the potential to take away that line of attack.
Yeah, this felt like the turn that Cook was going to try to resolve his first rev of the game for 3. You know, hopefully bridge into another rev. Now he has to cast a Dissolve, so he's not able to do exactly what he does want to do. Does get to scry, of course, and get protect his hand, but I think this is the turn again that he wanted to draw 3 cards and gain 3 life. Top card going to go to the bottom from the Dissolve. You've got Boettcher going to play a land. It's a copy of Mana Confluence. You see the Charm in his hand. You see him tapping a bunch of mana. He's going to take 1. Looks like he may try to resolve a Vraska, perhaps? He is. The Unseen Planeswalker is placed onto the stack. We'll see if it does resolve, and it will. Going to take down Jace right now.
A slightly risky play there from Jared. He was giving up on another World Connections activation, possibly pulling into a Syncopate there, but Bryant without any defense for it, and now Vraska's on the table.
There's some claims that in the Jace versus Vraska deck, Jace typically wins. Not that time.
No.
Vraska got him that time.
Well, if they're both literally in play at the same time, then Vraska has an edge, but that's not really what the matchup's about necessarily.
A Blood Baron of a Scope are going to come into play for Cook. One of his potentially 2 copies. Again, one in his main deck, one in his sideboard. As you mentioned, Boettcher was kind of, messing around. Getting his footing, a lot of card advantage, stuff like this, but now this forces him to actually do things.
Yes. You need to be proactive post-board, I think, with Esper in general, especially against black decks, because your hand's going to get attacked a lot more. Your counter spells are less durable. Your Sphinx's Revelations are going to be attacked from all sorts of angles. So, and these decks are also cutting all their creature removal post-board. So just stick a large threat and try to win the game that way.
Temple of Malady with the land for Boettcher is going to do a top card to the bottom. Gonna go tapping some manas here. This is a copy of Lifebane Zombie. Time to take a look at the grip. It's a little late to the party. I bet it would have liked to snag that Bloodbrain. You see an Aetherling along with a Jace, a Verdict, and a Revelation. So a very, very powerful hand here for Cook. And I wouldn't be surprised that if he were to draw a land, he probably slams Aetherling into play with the mana available. And he's really taken a more aggressive approach to this game.
Well, Jared's probably showing no ability to beat this Blood Baron. And so it stands to reason he can't beat an Aetherling with mana up as well.
And one thing Boettcher has not done yet this turn is activate that Vraska. He will cast the Thoughtseize, however, first. See exactly what he does want to take. He says, Revelation, you've got to go. Same thing that we saw him do in game 1. Vraska does take up. We'll pass the turn back over to Cook, who will untap those lands. He will take a draw. Again, we know he has Aetherling in his hand. And given the last game, where once he did have 7 lands, he just played Aetherling with the mana up, we could see that again. He'll take a look at Vraska here exactly to make sure he knows what it does. We'll do the same. As Vraska's the Unseen's first ability doesn't really come into play very often. If you attack it, it destroys the creature. I think what Bryant was probably looking at is, does that work with the protection from black creature?
Right.
And it does.
Correct.
Because it does not target. It says destroy that creature. Either way, Cook looks like he's gonna get into Boettcher's life total, as that's much more important at this point. We'll play a Jace, post-combat. Gonna take it down. There's a Temple of Silence. There's another copy of Revelation and an Island. We'll see how Boettcher wants to break them. Pretty clear, as it looks like Cook says, you want to do this, right? And Boettcher says, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I do.
And this is really good for Bryant because it gives him insurance against another discard spell. Because if he has Aetherling and Sphinx's Revelation left over in hand, so even if Jared finds, another Duress or a Thoughtseize or some such, he still has 2 Haymakers in his hand.
D-side going to take care of the Underworld Connections. You saw Cook kind of taking a look at his own card saying, do I get all of these? No, it's not a god. You do not.
No.
You simply get to take care of one of the problem cards on the board for you, however. So the Connections is exiled now. Boettcher going to take a draw. You see his hand is pretty land heavy. A couple of copies of Temple of Malice there. He's going to play one of them. Take a look at the top card. see if he can find anything. The problem here for Jared is that he's just under the gun. As reactive as he would like to be with his discard spells and building up incremental advantages, this is what Esper is able to do, is put the pressure on you kind of out of nowhere with either a Blood Baron or an Aetherling, as you did mention, and Blood Baron has shown up to the party.
It's not just a draw-go deck. A lot of people are under the presumption that it's just, 12 counters, some removal spells, and 1 or 2 ways to win the game. And its game 1 configuration resembles that a lot of the time, but post-board you can change it to an entirely different deck, try to become a lot more proactive in playing to the board, which is so powerful because most people against you are going to be boarding out their ways to handle that sort of game plan.
Vraska's going to tick up here. You're going to see Mutavault get fired up here as well. Mutavault says, Jace, you're going to kindly leave. Life-Bane Zombie is going to put Cook down to 21. We'll see if Boettcher has any sort of follow-up. Again, you see the connections in his hand. There's Golgari Charm, which for the most part is basically useless in this game.
Yep, Supreme Verdict I don't think is going to be cast by Bryant here for a while, and no enchantments on Bryant's side of the table either.
Cook does pick up a card for the turn. He's going to start by attacking with the Blood Baron of Escopa. Boettcher's going to go down to 6. Cook is going to go up to 25. And we'll see if Cook has anything he'd like to play here. Or is it just time to hold up the mana for a Sphinx's Revelation? And it looks like it is that time. Boettcher going to draw his card, untap all of those lands, and we'll see what he can figure out. Because again, he did activate the Underworld Connections at the end of Cook's turn, and then takes his draw for the turn.
I think that's one of those spots where if Jared had drawn the 7th land, he would have played his Aetherling. But instead, it's just good here to rep for 3, hopefully find a 7th mana source, and then put Aetherling into play.
Yeah, I think that's the case. You see, Boettcher just ticks up his Vraska, attacks for 3, passes the turn back. That attack for 3 is actually going to be undone by this Revelation for 3 from Cook. But more importantly, Cook is able to find 3, make it 4 new cards for the turn. We'll see if any of these lands do come into play untapped, but it looks like he may have picked up another copy of Blood Baron with Scopa, and if that's the case, I'm not sure Boettcher has a way out of this.
I think Jared's plan for this turn is to try to trade with some Mutavaults, maybe regenerate his creatures or what have you with the Golgari Charm. Bryant's almost approaching the point where his Blood Baron is ready to go Ultimate 2.
Not something we see a lot of.
Not a lot of. We rarely see it in a spot where it's relevant that that's what happened.
That's true.
Usually it's kind of incidental, but this game it could be meaningful that that's the case.
Mutavaults, it looks like they're on blocking duty, with a little bit of help from Golgari Charm in just a moment, most likely. It looks like Jared has 2 copies of that card in his hand, so you see Bryant's going to organize the blockers. He says, all right, I'm 1 Mutavault first, other 1 second. I'd like to try to kill both of these. Golgari Charm says, I'd like to regenerate my Mutavaults, if that's okay with you. Cook with a Dissolve, looking to try to say no to this.
And Jared having a 2nd copy of Golgari Charm makes it really good for Jared that Bryant's choosing to fight over this.
It does change the way this game is going to be played. So here's a Dissolve. Take a look. Top card to the bottom. Time for another charm, maybe? Yes, it is. Boettcher will take 1 to cast. He's going to go down to 4. Blood Baron is going to bite the dust. Cook is going to gain 4 life. He's going to go up to 29. But Boettcher might be potentially back in the driver's seat here. There's a Temple of Deceit.
There was some risk to that play, of course. If Bryant had a land and a Supreme Verdict, for example, this would be really bad for Jared, but he's got to play a little risky here because he can't fight that Blood Baron long term.
So Boettcher is going to draw a card here with the connections. He's going to go down to 3. He will take a draw. Desecration Demon is what he's found.
And that turn felt like a big swing there for Jared. If Bryant had simply let his Blood Baron die and followed up with an Aetherling or a Blood Baron, I think Jared is definitely out of the game. Not that that's necessarily a mistake from Bryant's end, but the fact that Jared had a 2nd copy of Golgari Charm, so good for him for the way these turns played out.
Yeah, you have to imagine that Cook thought he was going to win that fight.
Yeah.
And that's completely reasonable. Boettcher's going to fire up 2 Mutavaults, come across here for 7 points of damage. Cook's going to go down to 22. 3 mana at the ready. Can't represent a Dissolve at this point, but can represent a Syncopate or a removal spell. Boettcher, again, has a Desecration Demon in his hand. I think he's considering the ramifications of casting this versus holding it. Is it time to really turn up the heat and put the pressure on? Looks like the answer is yes. He's going to take 1 from Manic Influence to do so. He's down to 2. There's a 6/6. Vraska going to tick up. Simply pass the turn back over to Cook, who will take a draw here. Again, we know he has a copy of Aetherling as well as a copy of Blood Baron with Scope in his hand. He'll lead off with Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top card. Decide where he wants to put this. It's going to go to the bottom. This is 6 mana. This could be a Ling, and it is, with the blue mana at the ready.
And this is Bryant saying, I don't believe that you have an ultimate price or anything along those lines that could kill an Aetherling in instant speed, because the Vraska can activate and blink it out once. So if Jared has some follow-up that can kill an Aetherling, he gets out from under this. But Brian, maybe his hand doesn't allow him to do anything else, and maybe he just correctly assumes that Jared probably doesn't have much in the way of removal in his deck left into the post-board games.
Boettcher activates connections one more time for a new card, goes down to 1, takes a draw for his turn, and we'll see if he can work his way out of the situation. There's a Temple of Abandon, I believe, in his hand. You also see the Erebos hanging out over there. The big question is, does he have an answer to the problem that's on the table? And if he doesn't, you know, a concession is probably in order, because he's going to die, but we see the time in the middle, 21 minutes. You can assume that maybe this game ends with 20 minutes left. These games aren't short.
No.
There's a lot of back and forth here. Vraska's going to tick down and try to take down Aetherling. Going to blink that out, will Cook. So the road is clear for Boettcher right now. And again, the other card that you see in his hand is a copy of Abrupt Decay. And we're going to come here for 9. Cook is going to go down to 13.
And this is Jared here trying to hope that Brian makes a mistake. Maybe he forgets to give his Aetherling unblockable, and Jared still has a shot to win the game.
Oh, there's a copy of Erebos. Going to pass the turn back. Aetherling going to come back from hiding. Blue, activate, bash you. Game is over. Brian Cook going to tie it up against Jared Boettcher. Esper Control and Jund Midrange are going to game number 3.
And Jared, with a lot of reactive cards in that game, Abrupt Decays and Golgari Charms and such, the question here is, can Jared board into a more aggressive deck? We saw that he did bring in the Lifebane zombies to give him a little bit more pressure and to fight against potential Blood Barons and Obzdats and so forth, but he really needs to play as proactive a game as he possibly can, because Brian showed that he's boarded into multiple creatures, and Jared can only sit on his heels and try to draw cards for so long.
As these players go back to the drawing board, we will take a look at our new promotion here at Star City Games, especially on the Open Series. The most adorable Stoneforge Mystic there's ever been.
Aha!
Acorn Mystic is in the house. The creature collection adds another card to its pool. I know there are more coming, but those are secrets. We can't tell you guys about those. But what we do have is Acorn Mystic beginning on July 13th. They're going to start with the Invitational next weekend.
I'm really excited for the time where Star City Games transitions fully into just making animatronic playmats and stuffed animals and such.
Yeah, we're almost there.
When we finally ditch all this competitive magic and then fully transition to our core competency, which is adorable illustrations of animals.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, soon we'll do pandas of stuff like this.
Why not?
Perhaps zebras and giraffes. Hippopotami. I don't know if that's the plural, but I hope it is.
I think it's hippopotamuses. No, hippopotamuses, I think.
Hippopotamuses? Well, hippo is my favorite animal. So I think we should have a hippo card.
My very good friend Gary Arant, also his favorite animals.
Hippo?
Is the hippo.
Who doesn't love a hippo?
Those things are really violent. I don't know if you know that or not.
I've watched YouTube videos of them attacking things.
Yeah, they are big and they are ornery and they are fully capable of killing human beings.
Much like me. Just leave us alone.
It's very similar.
Just leave us alone. It's fine. Hippos are great. Maybe we'll have some hippo cards in the near future. What we do know is that Acorn Mystic, beginning on June 13th at the Open Series, any Legacy Open that you do enter, you'll get 2 of those. And of course, you can buy the playmat, the deck box, the dice bag, the sleeves, and anything else Acorn Mystic related. So check that out. I know that those products have been a big fan of people at home. They're always interested in what the next one's going to be. I know we'll have another one coming out later this year, but we can't tell you what it is just yet.
No.
Not just yet. Can't ruin the surprise. Surprises are fun. Maybe someone will surprise me. Maybe it'll be a hippo card.
Maybe.
Probably not. Not yet. I don't know if the world's ready for hippos.
Just a playmat of a really adorable hippo tipping over a boat full of humans as they're screaming about to be submerged into the Nile River or whatever. Make this happen.
What would the name of the card be? It's gotta be a play on a different card.
Sure.
See?
I'll think about it.
See, that's what it's supposed to be. Just capsizing a boat.
Yeah.
How big is this hippo?
It's really big.
Cook and Boettcher headed to game number 3 here in just a moment. Esper Control, Jund Midrange, 2 of the decks that, actually, truth be told, when we think about the Open Series and just Standard in general, these aren't really the top 2 decks that you think about. You think about, Black Devotion. Perhaps at the front of your minds right now is the Naya big range deck that Justin Crandall won with last weekend. We think of Burn and stuff like that. These are kind of 2 fringe players. We've seen Revelation Strategies, of course, have success in the past, but it's been kind of trending downward recently.
Jund Midrange to me is just still a derivative of Mono Black Devotion, which is Thoughtseize and Hero's Downfall to catch-alls to everything, sources of card advantage like Underworld Connections, and then the rest of the deck sort of suited to your flavor depending on what you're trying to fight and what cards you're really concerned about.
A Temple of Abandon for Boettcher is going to lead things off. Cook going to play a Temple of Silence. Top card's going to go to the bottom for him. He will pass it back over to Boettcher, who will play a Temple of Malice. Take a look at the top card here. And it looks like it will stay on top potentially as Boettcher's going to consult his hand. He leaves it on top, passes the turn back over to Cook. Cook going to play a copy of Temple of Enlightenment. That top card's going to go to the bottom as well. He'll pass it back over to Boettcher. So if you're not used to Temple starts now, you certainly will be for the next, year and a half.
Oh, for sure. These things are not going anywhere. 8, 12, maybe even more Temples are going to be the stock way to build decks for a really long time, I feel like.
Time for a Thoughtseize. You're going to see a grip of lands along with a Deicide and a copy of Sphinx's Revelation. There is another Temple there for Cook, but the rest of those lands are relatively boring. So we'll see what Boettcher wants to take. Wouldn't be surprised if it is Revelation again, as he's taken it with other Thoughtseizes in the past.
Jared's hand would have to be really specific to take Deicide here. It'd have to be something where he has another discard spell and an Underworld Connections or an Erebos or something along those lines.
Yes. Now, this is my favorite part as a pack rat comes into play. The Twitter audience wondering what the Hippo card could be. It could very simply be Capsize.
Capsize is great.
Submerge, also fine. And some people even said Upheaval.
I really like Capsize.
Yeah, Capsize is good. I would like to buy back that card.
Yep.
This is going to be a copy of Last Breath off the top here to take care of that pack rat. Cook could have been in some real trouble, but able to work his way out of the situation with a timely top deck. Boettcher going to play a copy of Courser of Crewfix. I said if you're not used to Temples, you better get used to this one too, because this thing's not going anywhere either. Temple of Melody going to come into play. Top card's going to go to the bottom. Hero's Downfall's going to go away. Overgrown Tomb will be the draw here for Boettcher. He does gain a life, of course, in that exchange. Pass then turn back over to Cook, who will take a draw here. Again, Cook with a very land-heavy hand. Going to play a Hallowed Fountain. Does have that Deicide in his hand. He's going to fire that off to take care of the Courser. I'm sure Boettcher had an idea that that was coming, as he saw that with the Thoughtseize earlier. But Cook's hand right now, I believe, is just all lands. So Boettcher's going to draw that copy of Overgrown Tomb. He's going to put that into play untapped and play a Vraska. Again, the problem here for Jared is that he's just very, very reactive.
Well, he still has a copy of Rakdos Return in his hand. So if Bryant doesn't find anything to defend himself, this Rakdos Return is going to take away the rest of his hand. Bryant's going to be living off the top, and then you could even see something like simply Vraska Assassin tokens take the day.
That would bring a smile to my face.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
All things being honest. You see Boettcher does have a copy of Devour Flesh in his hand now as well. Doesn't surprise you one bit. Ended up losing game 1 to the combination of Blood Baron Viscopa and Aetherling. Didn't see Blood Baron in game number 1. Doesn't surprise me to seeing him bring that card back in. Cook is just going to play a Plains and pass the turn back over to Boettcher. Boettcher will take a draw. This is a copy of Rakdos' Return. That'll be for 4.
Oh boy.
He says, do I get the whole grip or not? We're going to have a response, and it's a good one. It's a Sphinx's Revelation for 3.
The best response Bryant can have in this spot, of course.
Yeah. Outside of a counterspell,
yeah.
That's a good place to be, because he was going to lose the whole grip. And he's still going to lose 4 cards, but he could be doing a lot worse.
This is, of course, the risk with these Jund mid-range decks is Sphinx's Revelation is always something that's on your mind, always looming.
Yeah. You're just kind of hoping when your opponent passes all that mana up that they just don't have anything to do.
Sometimes I wonder if I don't like sideboard plans that are 3 or 4 copies of Slaughter Games, but I think 1 copy of Slaughter Games supplementing your other discard could be reasonable.
I'm fine with the Miser's one. Vraska's going to go ultimate here. Now, you saw Cook discard a Detention Sphere, and, that may have been on purpose to maybe lull Boettcher in here, because Boettcher says, give me 3 Assassin tokens, and if I hit you, you lose. So I hope that you didn't discard the Detention Sphere on accident, because I'm going for the win right now.
It's going to put him to the test here. The thing is, if he has Detention Sphere, it's already fairly bad for Jared because he just loses the Vraska. So
1, 2, and 3. Now there's the Sphere. That'll take care of the Assassin tokens. Can't be too surprised there if you're Boettcher. A Temple of Enlightenment's going to come into play. Cook's going to leave the top card on top, pass it back over to Boettcher, who will take a draw. This is a copy of Desecration Demon. And that'll be it for Boettcher's turn. Cook will take a draw. This is a Blood Baron Viscopa that he left on top very quickly with the Scry. Boettcher taking a look right now at the Devour Flesh. He's not going to cast it right now because he does not want to walk into a Syncopate for 1.
Yeah, he has nothing else to do with his mana, of course, so he can afford to be conservative in the face of 2 mana available for Bryant.
Devour Flesh with mana available will get the job done now on that Blood Baron. He'll gain a little bit of life, but he's going to lose more of it from this Desecration Demon attack. Boettcher looking at just 1 card in his hand. Actually 2, excuse me. One of them is a Forest, however. One of them is a Mystery. As Cook will draw a card, it's a copy of Chase Architect of Thought, rather timely for the Planeswalker. That's going to tick down. 3 cards coming in Plains, and Syncopates. Split the lands versus the Counterspell, even though it's not much of one at this point in the game because Boettcher does have a lot of mana in play.
Well, it's not very good this turn, but it could be good on subsequent turns. Bryant's able to untap, then the Syncopate's probably online. Jared with a lot of 4 and 5 mana spells in his deck.
Boettcher going to play a land. He's going to tap some mana. Going to put a Vraska into play. This will be a Dissolve. That was the last card in Cook's hand. That's a good one. You're going to put the top card to the bottom. Take care of the Jace with the Desecration Demon, pass the turn back over to Cook. Cook going to draw a mystery card. He'll pass the turn back. We know about a Syncopate. We don't know the other card. Boettcher will draw a card, attack for 6. Cook is going to go down to 11. Does Boettcher have a follow-up play?
He doesn't have a lot of ways to kill a Desecration Demon, but he still has Sphinx's Revelation and some other draw steps that drag him back into this game.
Boettcher will just pass over to Cook. Cook going to draw a card. That's a timely one. It is a Blood Baron of Ascopa off the top. Boettcher's going to untap his 6/6 flyer. He will draw a card. It looks like he picked up a copy of Pack Rat.
He picked that up last turn, didn't want to cast it into the face of the Syncopate and also the potential for Supreme Verdict. Now that Bryant cannot cast Syncopate and Jared is fine probably with a Supreme Verdict getting cast in this spot, he's going to deploy the Pack Rat.
Boettcher going to play a Temple of Malady after the Pack Rat. 1 card left in his hand with the ability to activate to make Pack Rats into 2/2s. He leaves that top card on top, so we could see him cast that next turn, even though we don't know what the card is just yet. Cook going to draw a card again. We know he has a Syncopate in his hand. The other cards are currently a mystery. It looks like a Mutavault and a Dissolve are the other 2 cards as Cook. You can tell he's a little bit worried about this situation. He's almost forced to attack at this point to bring his life total up out of demon range.
Yeah, but Jared still has lethal on the way back here. He can make a rat at the end of Bryant's turn, untap and make a rat just to pump his remaining rats. That's 6 from the demon plus 3 from each Pack Rat is a total of 11 points of damage. Even Bryant going up to 9 does not save him in this spot, so Bryant needs something else.
He's going to start by playing a Mutavault. A Mutavault might be on sacrifice to Desecration Demon duty. Underworld Connection, Pack Rat is going to be discarding a Overgrown Tomb. Again, Boettcher kept this card on top. I'm interested to see exactly what this is, as the race is certainly on between these 2 players. Desecration Demon trigger is going to go on the stack here. You have to wonder who thinks they're in the better spot right now.
Again, Bryant has to do something. He can't chump block with the Mutavault here because, again, the rats are going to be 3/3s, and so Jared has exactly 9. So he either needs a removal spell or to sack to the demon.
Cook taking a look at his hand, trying to figure out what the best line of play can be now. You saw him sacrifice the Mutavault to the demon.
James Carroll, please report to the stage.
Boettcher, I think he has to attack. So he's going to attack here for 4. Could be 6. Again, we know he kept that card on top of his deck. All right, he's going to discard Lifebane Zombie and make another one.
Doesn't want to cast anything into the face of the counter spells he knows are in Bryant's hand, so I think he's just going to be making rats with any spell he draws.
Yeah. In comes the Blood Baron again. Cook's going to go up to 7 now. Boettcher's going to go on to 11. Let's see what this is. He's reaching for mana. Verdict or a Jace? Yeah, that's a timely Supreme Verdict. That'll clear everything up. Boettcher going to draw his card. He's going to play Temple of Abandon. And now the Syncopate is much better.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to answer probably the next spell that Jared has, most likely. Although Mutavault, an excellent draw, of course, in the face of that. And now Bryant has a lot of high upside draws in his deck and insurance against any of Jared's big draws.
And he left his card on top here. Boettcher going to come in with the Mutavault. Cook's going to go down to 5. I wonder what Boettcher drew. He gave a moment. Uh-oh, this is a bunch of mana. Is this a Ling? Yes, it is. Aetherling here for Bryant Cook. Looking to close this game out very, very quickly. Boettcher drew a copy of Rakdos' Return. He's trying to work his way with this through a Syncopate, which he can do, but he can't do it through a Dissolve.
Oh.
Dissolve is going to counter that. Cook scries his card on top right away. Boettcher plays a scry land, puts his land on the bottom. Cook draws that card that he kept on top very quickly. Aetherling going to go unblockable style, wants to work its way through that Mutavault. We'll see how much damage he wants to deal with it.
Yeah, going and knocking Jared down to 7 here is fine. The Aetherling is still lethal next turn. What a Dissolve there from Bryant.
A couple more pumps. It looks like it's going to be an attack here for 6. Boettcher's going to go down to 5, blink that out, blink it back in, pass the turn back. Again, we know about that Syncopate. Boettcher draws his card for the turn. Does he have a way out of this one? Cook, you can see he wants to show his hand right now. I think he has another dissolve. Yeah, he's going to show dissolve and a syncopate.
Yep.
Boettcher's going to show a copy of Golgari Charm. And I think what we watched is a very, very nice comeback here from Bryant Cook, and that is going to do it. Bryant Cook with Esper Control is going to take down the Rookie of the Year frontrunner, Jared Boettcher, 2-1. Esper takes down Jun midrange.
And what was really meaningful for me in those games was Bryant sideboarding into just more ways to win the game, really blowing up Jared's plan of sit on my heels, draw some cards, make you discard things, and sort of kill you arbitrarily. The post-board game where Jared came the close to winning is the one where he had Desecration Demon and was really putting significant pressure on Bryant. But Blood Baron of Vizkopa and Aetherling are just so much better than the threats that Jared brings to the table that unless Jared is super disruptive, clears out his whole hand with Rakdos Return or something along those lines, he's going to really struggle to beat a sideboard package of just a lot of creatures post-board.
Hey, you got to like the fact that the Esper Control player here in Cook actually took a more proactive approach after sideboard.